Welcome to Video 8, Evaluating Wide Research and Primary Sources. By the end of this video, you will be able to understand how students present their bibliography and how to rank their project with regard to their research. Both the wide research and primary source rubric categories examine the project's bibliography. The National History Day rulebook specifies that an annotated bibliography is required for all categories. It also lists a series of requirements for the bibliography and the annotation. The annotation is a 2 to 3 word explanation of how the student used each source in their project and how it helped them to understand the topic. The annotation helps the student by allowing them to reflect on the way the sources shape their project. It can also help you by pointing you to where the student may have included the source in their project and by showing that they understood the source. Rule 20 specifies that the students may use either the Chicago Manual of Style or the MLA Handbook. Mostly, it's important that the students learn to stay consistent in their citations and that they understand why these steps are important for research. However, as judges, we want you to focus on slightly different parts of the bibliography. While it is important for the student to follow the guidelines for bibliographies, the focus of your evaluation should be on the quality of the research that they did. Students who advance from a district contest will have time to edit their bibliographies, but it will be harder to add significant new sources. Therefore, judges evaluating projects should look for quality of sources rather than the polish of the bibliography or the number of sources that students include. Information is always going to be more important than grammar or adherence to the style guide. If the student has poor formatting, that should be noted in the comment section. This is only a major rules infraction if formatting prevents you from checking that citations are correct. Your focus will be on the variety of the sources and the student's application of their sources. Let's see next how the rulebook talks about wide research and primary sources. Wide research refers to the variety of types of sources that students use in their research. This excerpt lists different types of materials that students may use, including books, articles, credible websites, documentaries, and more. Remember, the number of sources is not as important as their quality. The rulebook may also include many types of primary sources. If you are unfamiliar with primary and secondary sources, make sure to read page 9 of the rulebook for a review. Primary sources are those created during the time the student is researching or an account of that time. For example, a news article about the Delano grape strike published in 1969 is a primary source, while a news article from 2019 about the strike is not. However, the same project may include a 2021 article about the Nabisco factory strike as a primary source to talk about the impact of the topic. When looking at a project for wide research, you will consider these three main questions. First, does the bibliography include good sources? For many students, the History Day contest is their first research project. We want to guide students to reliable places for information. This can be internet sources from the Library of Congress or book sources from their local library or many, many more. You may see students who have cited history.com or Encyclopedia Britannica. These are also important sources that show students a good overview of information and are generally quite reliable. Next, we want to see students go beyond those beginning websites to access varied sources. Think about the pie analogy discussed in video 7. A bigger slice of pie will have more variation in sources and will be a higher ranking. Here, the descriptors are limited, moderate, sufficient, and extensive. A moderate variety might mean some books, a few websites, and a number of photographs, while a sufficient variety might include more photographs and also a recorded oral history and a documentary. Alternatively, especially for younger students, moderate variety may mean mostly sources like history.com and Britannica, while a sufficient variety will expand to other internet sources, such as the Library of Congress and the National Archives. Ultimately, there is no set number of sources or types of sources that are moderate or sufficient. It's up to your judge group to deliberate and decide for each project. An exemplary level project will have an extensive variety that goes above and beyond. For example, a student might have done their own source translations or taken the time to visit a historic site. As we have mentioned, it's good to remember that the projects you are ranking were created by students from 11 to 18 years old. When you rank them for wide research, consider what is available to students of this age. Make sure not to evaluate them on college level metrics. You must also consider what resources are available for the topic and accessible by the student. An ancient history topic will have to rely more heavily on art. A topic about Marie Curie will have to rely on the sources that have been translated into English. A project that is exemplary or proficient may have a surprising source. One example comes from a 7th grade student group in Baltimore City schools. Their project focused on the Stonewall Uprising, and in addition to several solid internet sources, the students included short interviews with their classmates about the current day impact of the uprising. The Students' Board included quotes from the interviews as a way of showing impact. These students successfully used interesting sources that are available to them. Primary sources are a key component of the Maryland History Day project. Because the student is supposed to take on the role of the historian, they should draw from a large range of primary sources. The judge rubric sheet asks you to assess how primary sources are used to support the student's historical argument. First, identify the primary sources. Students sometimes confuse primary with secondary. Look to their annotations for how they use the sources. Sometimes students will include rationale for classifying a source as primary or secondary. Next, think about the extent to which the primary sources support the historical argument. How do students use the primary sources in their project? An exemplary project will have sources that consistently support the argument, and the result will be a project that is influenced by the sources. The full primary source pie is a project where the sources are thoughtfully used and analyzed as evidence. Remember, focus on the quality over the quantity and avoid comparing projects to each other. A documentary about a modern topic will probably use many more photographs than a paper about ancient history, but both can use the available sources to consistently support the historical argument. Thank you for joining Maryland History Day. Continue on to Video 9, Historical Context and Multiple Perspectives.